Game 5 is perhaps the longest game of the match. The reason for that is because there's possession on the board. Now, that is not always the case. Sometimes you can ignore possession. Usually in those cases, the game ends too quickly for possession to come into play. Possession is very, very expensive at 6 and a potion. However, here, I believe that the game will not end so quickly for possession not to matter. In other words, it will come into play, and it is something that we have to build towards and to deal with should we or your turn become possessed. So that is a bit into the future. Of course, possession, like I said, is very expensive. There's no way, real way for us to buy possession on turn 3 or 4 here. What we have to try to do in the meantime is to get thin and get down to this possession business as quickly as possible. So ways to get thin include Forge and Miser, and I'm looking here at picking up a Forge early. That is my plan. My opponent opens with the Replace. Now an alternative play for him could have been summoning an Envoy. That seems to be the best summon target. Instead he opts for the Replace and a Lighthouse. I go for an Envoy and a Silver, searching for the Forge. That I felt would give me the best opportunity to get to Forge, and getting thin means I can get my possession things up and running as soon as possible. So here on this $5 hand, I know I have Necropolis and Envoy in the last 7 cards, so I thought summoning another Envoy at that point should give me a decent chance of getting to 7. All I really need to see is my Envoy in this hand, which I do, and I will be guaranteed to get up to 7 for my Forge. So said, so done. I'm able to get the 7 coppers that I need to pick up the Forge because of Summon. Summon is an incredible event. In the meantime, my opponent has picked up another Lighthouse. Through their Replace, the Lighthouse is somewhat okay, perhaps not right now. When Followers comes into the game, then you would really like to have your Lighthouses up. But right now, he's just getting rid of the shelters from his deck with the Replace. So what I like to do in possession games where it is relevant is, I think one of the better things to do as my opponent summons an Envoy is to build a deck that just draws and plays possession and doesn't do anything else. So here I don't see my Forge of the Envoy reveal, which means it's in the last 4 cards, which means if I summon an Envoy here, I'll get plus 4 cards in my hand at the start of my next turn, giving me a large hand size, and Forge loves large hand sizes. So I am going to summon a second Envoy here. A second Envoy, putting me at 3 Envoys in my deck, but it's okay because I'll be able to Forge very soon and deal with that terminal collision appropriately. So here, I consider getting rid of my opponent's Replace, but instead, undo that and choose to get rid of a copper, hoping that it would knock him down from Forge, meaning he would not have $7 if I denied him a copper of the Envoy. That is not the case. He still had enough money to do so. This Envoy was summoned by him, so he can still play the Replace, which he does, and he still is able to get up to Forge. So I wasn't able to prevent that, but what can you do? The game goes on. So this summoned Envoy reveals an Envoy which my opponent discards, rightly so. If I was allowed to play that Envoy, I would draw perhaps all the junk cards in my deck and remove all of them in one Forge play. However, I am still able to get rid of a large amount of junk cards, 5 coppers and 1 shelter, alongside the silver, and I will take a tournament here because like I said, I do have a plan for the excess Envoys in my deck. The plan is to Forge 2 of those guys into Province, and then I have Tournament Province in a very thin deck, and I can start building up for possession afterwards. We do have some villages and draw on the board, native villages. My opponent has quite a few of them, and envoy for draw. So there is some possibility to build a deck that plays a lot of possessions. Procession is also on the board, but I don't really think it's that good here. There's no real chain. You could use it on 4 costs to get 5 costs, and that's the end of that. Or to perhaps trash an Necropolis. I don't really see much use for procession in this game, but then again, I'm not the best with procession. So my opponent manages to get a decent sized forge going here, 6 coppers down, as well as a lighthouse, I believe. So he gains a native village off of it. So here I play the envoy first because I know that the tournament will draw whatever card was discarded by my opponent. So I have full liberty here to trash whatever it is I want, and I'm gonna clean up the remaining coppers from my deck and 2 envoys for the province. The only starting cards remain is a Necropolis, which I'm currently making use of, as well as a Hovel, which, well, is unfortunate to not have been trashed yet, but I'm pretty happy with my position, sorry, not possession. I'm a little bit thinner than my opponent, and I have the tournament province combination before my opponent has either of those things. He now picks up a tournament on his last turn here, alongside a poorhouse. I also picked up a poorhouse on my turn. I have 0 treasures in my deck, so why not pick up a poorhouse? So first choice of prize here is going to be the steed. Gives me some actions, and which I don't really have right now, and it also gives me some draw, which is going to be very important if I want to be playing multiple possessions here. Still, we are in the race to get up to possession very quickly and to be able to play lots of possessions. That is the key here, the key strong point on the board, I believe, the thing to do here, the payload as some people call it. So what I do here, I didn't like any subsequent turns. I trashed my only envoy into a potion and I bought another tournament. The part I didn't like is trashing the envoy into the potion. I maybe should have kept the envoy because, like I said, draw is going to be an issue, and I need to take care of that. I still have a hovel in my deck. I still have a Necropolis, and now I put a potion in. All of these cards don't draw, so I should really take care of my draw. But by trashing the envoy, I haven't really done so. Now my opponent is able to follow me quite closely here. He trashes his forge with a replace to get a province, and he's able to use his tournament right away on that province and will pick up the followers. So in the face of the discard attack too, the draw becomes very, very important. Very, very important. And he can make excellent use of the followers every turn because he has 4 native villages. I have no native villages. The only villages that I have are the Necropolis and the Trusty Steed. So here, for example, I need to see my Trusty Steed to have some kind of turn, otherwise it'll be quite lackluster, which would be a big setback at this stage in the game. So here, I'm going to take one more prize and not trying to look for the Trusty Steed, instead just going to stow it away for the next turn. And I do take, the reason I go for the prize is because I know the princess will get me up to possession. And I decide to take the chance that my opponent doesn't have the province. He doesn't have the province, so I'm able to play the princess right away and go for possession number 1. And we are in here, boys, with the possession. However, out comes the followers for my opponent, and I don't know when I'll see that possession now. I get rid of a couple cards, of course, keeping as many draw cards in my hand as possible. And I believe actually my opponent is going to get up to possession in short order here. His replace is still around, so he could immediately get rid of the estate that he gained for a potion. That's something that I would be looking to do, but I don't know if it's the best thing to do in his deck. And he perhaps can pick up the possession right away. I'm not sure how much money he has in his deck though. He does have the poorhouse, which is a sizable amount. So I think he does have just enough money to pick up the possession, if not this turn, in a couple turns. So I have to make as much use as I can of my possession while I have it. So at this point in the game, I think I recognize, you don't have as much draw as you think. So you should try to rectify that. In fact, my opponent now chooses to trash a copper into an estate, giving me another curse. So he seems to want to bombard me with curses at this point in the game to try to slow me down. Replace is another attack. I am very bad with replace. I just think of it as another remodel, but that is not true. One, it's an attack, so Lighthouse blocks it. Two, the things that you remodel go on top your deck if they're not green. I completely forget that all the time, which is bad. So I need to work on just thinking about all the things that replace does instead of thinking of it as a strict remodel. So I'm able to get my possession down luckily right away, and I see my opponent's hand here. So now you see a lot of the cards on this board become liabilities with possession. Native Village for one. If you have a bunch of cards in your Native Village, if I take your deck with possession, I could ruin that immediately. Tournament with Province. Liability, because I could just take all the prizes that you would gain. Another liability you'll see later on, and a big liability, is Envoy. Another thing with the tournament is that I don't have to reveal a province to block, so whatever tournament that I see in my opponent's hand is guaranteed to trigger. I'll just opt not to reveal my province and let his trigger and get the benefit from it. So 4 potion is not enough for another possession. 6 potion I would have bought a possession, no questions asked. But 4 is going to be enough for an envoy, which I desperately need at this point. Some envoys and some native villages. I really need to see about that. My opponent has a superior draw engine, if you would like. And he will get to possession soon enough, and we'll be able to make better use of that possession. So the possession turn for me there, I wasn't too unhappy with it. It could have been better because you see here he has the native village and the envoy. I know he has native villages and envoys in his deck, but I didn't see any of them. He, however, is able to see them on this turn, as well as his followers too, which again is not good news for me. I'm going to hold on to the province here because I expect him to play the tournament after the followers. Is a nice thing to do. You attack your opponent with a discard attack, then play the tournament. Has a much better chance of triggering. But I am going to hold on to the province to block that tournament, just to try to cut money off from my opponent to prevent him from buying that possession. And it seems like I was successful in doing that distance. So he still doesn't have a possession here. He does manage to gain a bag of gold though, and with his replace around, those that could be a province potentially. And now a couple interesting things. He takes a procession and he gets a couple points from Basilica for the second time, of course. Now the Basilica points are completely safe. You can do nothing with those points. If you are possessed, they're 4 points or however many you get, and they guarantee they stay in the game. There's no mischief that your opponent can do if he possesses you with Basilica points. So here my opponent is able to get up to 6 by using his procession on a poorhouse. 6 potion is what I meant to say there. So he now has a possession. So now the game has changed for me. I have to play with that in mind, that he has a possession. I would have loved to seen Forge here to get rid of these 4 curses in my deck. Unfortunately not going to happen. And 6, this is risky, and I didn't think about it at the time. I go for Summon Envoy. Now, if my opponent possesses me while I summon that Envoy, he's going to have an excellent turn. The reason I summon the Envoy is to try to trash a little bit, try to clean up my deck, and get the draw engine running a bit more smoothly so that I can possess my opponent more frequently. I did not consider that he might possess me on such a turn and reap the benefits of that large hand size for himself and take it away from me. So here you see Envoy being a liability, right? In this case, I just discard the most useless card instead of the most useful card and make full use of that Envoy. So Procession, I think I know why my opponent bought Procession. It was to try to trash his replace so that I can't use it. So for example, here I can use it to just gain a province, for example, by replacing a gold. But if he's not able to do that, what it means is that there's Procession and Replace in his deck. So I can get 2 plays of Replace instead of instead of none if he managed to trash it. So I am looking here for the Procession. I would love to find that Procession. I don't. I don't. But I do find the Possession and I put it into my hand here, making sure that it is not in the next 5 cards he'll draw. And in fact, just thinking a little bit about his deck, I know there's a Procession in the 5 cards there. And there's some estates, I believe, 1 estate perhaps. There's also a potion. So those 3 cards at least, they can't really do anything for him next turn. So I'm not going to draw any more cards with this followers to try to look for the Procession. Just going to leave those 5 cards in my opponent's hand and hopefully it causes him to stall on his next turn, giving me an effective free turn next turn. Yeah, you know some of the niceties of possession, sorry. So you saw his hand there and you can see it upside down here. He's dead unless he possesses his native village, which he does. So he can set aside 1 card, and if it isn't a draw card or possession, then he'll probably just set aside again, which he does. So he sets aside twice, effective free turn for me. So I do manage to successfully get this summoned envoy off. Lucky, lucky. I did manage to stack his deck a certain way, but it didn't have to work out, right? For example, the possession could have been in the bottom 5 cards. I was lucky to top deck it when I did. So I do get the big hand size, but I don't really get to trash too many curses. My opponent blocks 2 of my tournaments, which isn't great for me, of course. In fact, I'm considering now forging those tournaments into a province, because we both have, what, 2 provinces each, I believe? Or I have 3 and he has 1. I think we have 2 each. And they just might not trigger as much, especially given the thinness of our decks. So I believe that I pick up a duchy at some point. I think it's time for that, given that my opponent has a possession and there's only 4 provinces in the pile. I think I'm going to start, or try to start, liquidating as many of my assets, so to speak, into points at this point in the game. My opponent denies the native village here, rightly so, but I do manage to find another one, and it does allow me to trash quite a few cards here. Quite a few cards, particularly the curses. And what I'm also going to do is turn a province into a province with the forge. So I'm trying to just close out the game at this point with my points lead, and hopefully with this possession I can find, ideally, Procession, Replace, and 2 good targets to get double province. That's my ideal possession turn here, and then that would be very, very big points lead, and hopefully my opponent would not be able to come back from that. So let's see what we can do with this possession turn. This is an excellent hand to get for possession here, so I have to just play it very carefully and try to find the Procession. I do set aside the possession right away, so it's good to know that where that is. I'm not going to leave it on the mat at all. He has way too many native villages for me to even leave that on the mat. If he had just 1, perhaps I would have considered leaving it on the mat and leaving it stranded on the mat. Nowhere in his deck at all would it be, but he has tons of them, so it's very, very easy. I will take it off the mat eventually, but perhaps not right now. So here I play a tournament, I believe. No, I play the envoy first, right? Because I'm trying to get the tournament and the province together, as well as the procession and the replace. And I do find the procession and the replace on 2 targets, right? The gold and the province can get me 2 provinces. And I can also, what can I also do? Yeah, use the tournament and the province rather to gain a duchy. So here I do draw again with the tournament because I was trying to look for some extra money or the bag of gold or something on top of my opponent's deck to be able to perhaps remodel or use replace twice and buy another province to completely close out the game, but not the case. Instead, I'm just able to play replace twice and have, well, I don't have enough money for the duchy. I thought I did, but I counted wrong. I counted wrong. So perhaps I should have just used the tournament to pick up a duchy instead, but I didn't. I tried to play a little bit greedy and it didn't work out for me. So here, okay, so my opponent has a turn here finally, right? And I think he's gonna play Procession on Envoy first. So that's excellent for him, right? He has Native Village, Procession, Envoy. That's a great turn for him. What he is going to be able to do here is put a lot of gold into his deck, and more importantly, he's going to play Possession twice using a Procession. So, seeing this big hand size from my opponent, I know Possession is coming, right? So what I could have done there is discarded Tournament and Poorhouse, leaving Province Curse for my opponent to deal with. I could have done that, but I chose to discard just the Poorhouse instead of Poorhouse and Tournament. My thinking is that he might bluff me with the Possession, because I was not expecting him to use Procession on Possession. I was expecting a single Possession. Right, he still hasn't played his Possession yet, so I was expecting single, in which case I don't know if he was trying to bluff me or not bluff me, meaning he knows he's playing a discard attack. I know he's playing a discard attack, right? Which means I have the liberty to discard two cards from my hand, which could be the two best cards from my hand, rendering his Possession turn useless, or near to useless anyway. However, if he thinks that I am going to rig my hand so that I give him a bad Possession turn, he could just opt not to play the Possession after his discard attack. He could. So instead I chose a middle ground play, in which case I would still be able to pick up a duchy if he left me alone with my 3-card hand. As it is, he uses Procession and Possession and takes the duchy on that turn, and this final tournament, draws him into a province here and lets him finish the game on a tie, because he can forge into a duchy, I believe, or he can forge a province into a province, play the Poorhouse for what, $3, and then the diadem he has to play, but it will only be worth another 3 to pick up a duchy and win. So if the diadem would have been worth more money, I would have picked up Basilica points and win. As is, he drew exactly what he needed to tie, and that is a thrilling end to game 5.